My name is Jess, and today we're going to be going over interviewing for the Disney professional internships. Interviewing is something that can be very nerve-wracking and requires some preparation. So today I'm going to be going through my experiences interviewing for the Disney internships, my tips, and kind of going through how I best prepare for an interview and some of the things that have worked for me. So hopefully this is helpful if you're preparing for an interview coming up. So let's get into what is it like to interview for a Disney professional internship. So I have another video about all of the internships I have interviewed for. There's quite a variety. I've done 2 seasons of application for the summer of 2019 and the summer of 2020, and I interviewed for about 6 to 8 positions each time. So I've definitely gathered some experience from all of that. There's an important distinction to make between the first round phone screening and then the interview with the actual team. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about what that first round phone screening usually looks like and kind of the best ways to succeed for that. So the first round interview is usually always with a recruiter whose job is to do these screenings and go through resumes, so they're not usually an expert on the position itself. They kind of get a sense for who you are, confirm that you're interested in the position, and take some notes on how you answer a few questions, and then the team can use those answers to determine if they want to interview you further. So the questions that the recruiter usually asks is walk them through your resume. So that's something that's really important to practice and really get down so that you're comfortable explaining that. They often ask why you're interested in the role. So that's something that is important to cover and to know. And then they might ask a few additional questions like, do you know a certain program? That's often important. Or can you explain this position? It's like asking you to explain a little bit more on your resume. Usually it's pretty behavioral questions and stays around 20-30 minutes. I think the phone screening, it's important not to get too nervous, just to spend some time really feeling comfortable with your resume and comfortable with the job description, so you have an idea of what they're looking for, what they might ask you about, and then just be friendly. A lot of times the recruiters kind of like to chat at the beginning or end, so it's nothing to be too nervous about. I've also had phone screenings with the same recruiters for a few different positions, so that's always kind of fun to talk to them again. And then they ask if you have questions at the end. You can ask a few kind of specifics about the team, but again, they're usually not going to know exactly how many people are on the team or something like that. But you can ask them the timeline, some of the main tasks of the team, where the position is located. And an important one to always end on is, what can I expect? Like, what's the next step in the process? So then here's where they'll tell you when you can expect to hear back about the next round interview. And then usually you'll have their email, so if you have a question along the way, you can send them an email. So I always found those phone screenings, like once you've done a few of them, you get pretty comfortable with them. They're pretty similar each time, but you do want to be prepared in case they do ask you a more specific question. So then the second round interview, these are almost always with the teams, with the person that would potentially be your boss, especially for the professional internships. And these can be very nerve-wracking. A lot of times they are a video interview, which is cool because then you get to see them, they get to see you, and they will ask you a lot more specific questions. They're trying to get a sense for your resume a little bit more and your experience, but also your interests, your career goals, kind of how you think this internship will help you, and also they're trying to see if you're a good cultural fit. So they might ask questions about a time that you've been a leader, a time that you've solved a problem, a time that you've faced a challenge. I find that they do a lot of those situational questions, and then they might ask you questions more specific to the position about experience you have doing specific programs. Of course, this is going to vary a lot by role, but these interviews are usually can get a little bit more into the specifics of who you are, why you want the role, why you have experience in it, and what you're going to bring to the team. Still, they're pretty like friendly and casual, I always found. I found like a few things that have really helped me to prepare for these interviews and I think really do a good job on them. So the first one is that I have my resume printed out. This is really helpful because a lot of times they will refer to specific positions or specific things that you have listed on your resume, and then you can just see exactly what they're looking at and make sure to print out the version that you submitted, or if you have an updated one, you can send it to the recruiter and say that you have an updated one. And this kind of just reminds me, like, what's the general picture? What are they looking at? What do they know about me? How can I go deeper into this or bring something specific to their attention? So that's really important to have. And the second thing I always have is the job description. So I print out the job description. This was when I interviewed for the Disney Plus product role. And so I make sure to read like the description at the top about what the internship is. And then a little bit farther down, it has basic qualifications and preferred qualifications. So for example, this one for preferred qualifications, one of the bullet point is an interest in the evolving streaming landscape. So basically I go through each of these bullet points and I write next to it some of my thoughts or like a response on that. So if they ask me to explain how I'm interested in the evolving streaming landscape, I would want to have an answer for that. So if they were to ask me, when have you had to use an eye for good design and user experience, I want to put a good example right next to that. So every single bullet point, even if it's something as simple as having a good attitude, can you think of an experience that shows that you had a good attitude? And thinking about each of these bullet points beforehand really gives me the chance to give a specific example and the best example when I, the day before have more time to think about it instead of in the moment feeling frantic and maybe not using the best example. So that I think is really, really helpful to write down on these bullet points. And then on the back, I have a ton of notes. So this is kind of like as the interview is coming up, my head is just reeling with all these ideas. So I wrote strengths and weaknesses, super brief bullet point about what I want to answer for that. My favorite class. I've been asked that quite a few times. What is your favorite class in school? A time you overcame a challenge, a time you led a group. And as I'm just thinking, I'm just writing down some of the main points I want to mention that I think are most relevant to this role. Writing down those notes is super helpful because it gets your brain thinking about how you want to word it. And then the next thing would be to practice some of these answers out loud, because sometimes speaking them is a very different thing. So before an interview, I will practice, especially the run me through your resume question. I will do that just in front of the mirror to myself. Hi, my name is Jessie McConville. I went to UC Berkeley, blah, 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 and go through the whole thing. The last thing is, what questions do you ask them kind of towards the end of your interview? Recently, I've been interviewing people for my current job that I'm in, and when they have no questions, it is not a very good sign. It indicates to me that they didn't do that much research, they're not that interested in the position, they are kind of just taking anything they can get. I think it's important to be selective and use that as an opportunity to really further understand the role, further understand what they're looking for, and understand if it's going to be a good fit for you. So some of the questions that I like to ask are like, what is the biggest challenge your team faces? This can kind of help show you where their pain points are and where they're really looking for somebody to come in and elevate their team. What are some of your biggest goals and projects for the future? This is great because it shows what you might be working on with them. Sometimes I ask questions about how the team is structured, how the leadership works, what different groups are within the team. So that just helps give a picture of what the work environment is going to look like. And then a question that I love to ask is like, what are you looking for in an intern? What ideal qualities do you think an intern would have that would succeed at this role? And then this really helps you because if there is another round of internships, you kind of know where to emphasize your strengths because you know what they're looking for. And then also if they repeat something that you mentioned was your strength earlier in the interview, that's like usually a really good sign. So I really like that question. And then of course any other questions you have kind of about the specifics of the position. And then the logistics for the interview. So when the interview is coming up, I make sure I'm in a very quiet place, like in my home, in a closed room. When I was going to school, I would sometimes book a room on campus in our library, and then it would be locked. So I'd make sure I was quiet. I'd make sure I would get there a little bit before and just be sitting, just have time to be calm. I would make sure I have my laptop charger plugged in and headphones. I always use headphones because the microphone sounds better usually, and the plug-in kind so my Bluetooth doesn't die. Those like tech things, you don't want one of those to go wrong while you're on a video call. Wear a shirt that looks professional. It doesn't need to be like a suit jacket or anything, I don't think, but just a nice looking blouse or button-up shirt is usually good. Something that you feel comfortable in and that you have a plain-ish background is usually a good idea. And then I always have a glass of water, and I have like some of these were notes that I took during the interview, so I have my pen and paper, so then when you ask those questions and they answer them, you want to note what those answers are, because those can be really helpful to look back at later. Overall, the interview process is pretty straightforward, and it can vary a lot team to team. The teams don't really communicate to each other, especially within Disney. It's such a big company and there's a lot going on. So there are some parts of it that are streamlined, like having the recruiter that asks the first round questions, but there are a lot of aspects that are also very different depending on which area of the company it's in. So it's best to just stay as calm as possible, practice as much as you can before, do research on the position that you're applying to, so that you kind of know what that team is working on the best that you can, and just really practice with somebody that you know. Practice saying the answers, be comfortable explaining a lot of the work that you've done in the past, so that you have set yourself up to present yourself in the best light, and just make them really feel like they get to know you and feel that you are confident and able to complete this role successfully. And then after the interview, you can definitely email a thank you note, either to the recruiter or to the team. It's not fully necessary. I don't think they really expect it. So if you can't, that's fine, but it usually is a good thing to do. And I also, you get the schedule for the interview when you schedule it a week before. So you get the names of the 2 or 3 people you'll be interviewing with usually. So I would always look at their LinkedIn and kind of see where they went to school and some things like that, in case there was anything we had in common that I wanted to bring up about their past. So I would look at that beforehand. And then same as with the first round interview, during these video interviews, it's good to finish with what can I expect, what are the next steps of the process, and mention, if there's anything else you need from me, feel free to reach out, so that they know they can ask you any follow-up questions that they have. And sometimes it takes 2 to 3 weeks to really hear anything, and there's no need to email back out and be like, I haven't heard from you in a while. It's usually best to just wait and kind of see what happens, and they'll contact you when they've made a decision. So that was pretty straightforward. Those are all my experiences doing an interview. That's kind of what I would tell somebody that had an interview coming up. I hope that that can be a little bit calming, to know that the process is kind of similar for everybody. And the best thing that you can do is just feel confident, feel prepared, do everything you can to kind of do your research, get your answers laid out, go through potential questions and start thinking of answers, so then you feel ready to go. Other than that, they're just looking for your personality to come through. They're looking to see what makes you you. So just get ready to showcase everything that is unique that you have to bring to the table for this internship. So best of luck. I hope you kill it if you have an interview coming up. And thanks for watching. Please check out any of my other videos if they're interesting, and let me know if there's another topic you want me to cover.